And eventually they find something on you. As they say, you may be a great driver, a safe driver, but if a cop is behind you for long enough, they'll find something wrong. Similarly, that's what's happening with the Muslim community, unfortunately. But alhamdulillah, we have the CLCMA where you and I can reach out to if we need help. So without further ado, I want to introduce Mr. Samuel Cole from the CLCMA. Thank you. One last thing, sorry. Please, everyone, make sure you take one of these brochures. They're going to hand them out as well.
Yes, I'm going to hook it on here. Assalamu alaikum. As Abdullah said, my name is Sam Cole, and I'm an attorney with the Constitutional Law Center for Muslims in America. I intended to wear a suit tonight, but I was so excited to come and see everyone and talk to you that I ran out of the office and left it there, so sorry about that. I'm not a Muslim myself, but I lived in New York City around the time when everybody was talking about the Ground Zero Mosque and people were generating... yes, put it on my ear. Sorry, sure.
This is how it's going to go. It's a little bit tricky. Okay. How's that?
That works. Oh, perfect. Yes, this will be a lot easier. I'm going to set a timer so I don't talk too long. I was living in New York City around the time when everybody was pretending to be scared over the fake controversy about the Ground Zero Mosque. And I remember a Fox News story saying, "How would you feel if you lived in walking distance to a mosque?" And I thought, I do, and it's great. My friends and neighbors. I want to protect my Muslim brothers and sisters, and so that's when I first started to get interested in these issues. And then I moved to Texas, went to law school, and now I'm working at the Constitutional Law Center. So I wanted to start with this quote by Trevor Aronson. He's a reporter with the Mother Jones magazine, and he says, "The FBI has a vast army of spies located in every community in the United States with enough Muslims to support a mosque." He's talking about the more than 15,000, and now it's around 60,000, many more informants who are embedded in Muslim communities throughout the country. Now, what does that have to do with entrapment? I'll make that clear in just a little bit. So what we're going to cover today is I'm going to first talk about what is entrapment, and it's really two things. It's an investigative technique, and it's also a defense. It can be a defense in a criminal case. And I'm going to talk about how to protect yourself on the front end, how you can make sure that you're safe and don't get taken in with somebody who's trying to entrap you. By the end of this talk, hopefully you'll know what entrapment is, and you'll know how to protect yourself, and you'll also know how to talk about entrapment with somebody who wants to know exactly what it is. Okay, so lots of people start with a comic. You might know what entrapment is already if you have kids. Always trying to get each other in trouble, telling on each other. So entrapment is really two things. It's a police tactic, and it's a defense that sometimes people use in criminal cases. A valid entrapment defense has two related elements. One is its government inducement of the crime, and that can be a police officer, an FBI agent, or an informant, and can include informants. And then the second element, and this is a really important one, this is the most important one, is the lack of predisposition to commit a crime. So it's two things, really. Entrapment is a police officer or an informant convincing somebody to do something illegal, and a lack of no predisposition, an otherwise innocent person. I'm just going to talk about this really fast. In determining whether somebody has a predisposition to commit a crime and whether it's entrapment, they look at 5 different things: the character and reputation of the defendant, whether the government made the initial suggestion of criminal activity, whether the defendant engaged in the activity for profit, whether the defendant showed any reluctance, how long it took to convince him to go along with the illegal activity, and the nature of the government's inducement, what the government did to convince the person to do something illegal. It's very difficult to prove an entrapment defense. You need almost a perfect case, as that quote says. It just doesn't happen very often, and you're about to hear why. So I don't know if anybody recognizes this car. That's a DeLorean, made famous by the Back to the Future movies. And what does this have to do with entrapment? John DeLorean, the person who invented the car, was having some financial problems, and he was completely broke. And this person who was a previously convicted criminal, a previously convicted drug dealer who was trying to make a deal with the government, agreed to be an informant. And he said something along the lines of, "I just met John DeLorean, and he's really down on his luck, and I think I could bring him in for you." And so he went and met with John DeLorean and said, in a first meeting, "We have somebody who wants to invest $10 million into your company." And he tried to convince him to go along with this deal. He didn't say anything suspicious in the first meeting, and they recorded that conversation, but eventually deleted it because there was nothing incriminating. Well, in the second meeting, he said, "I have somebody who wants to invest $15 million in your company, and it could really save you. But they're involved in a drug deal, and I need you to sell this cocaine for me to get this $15 million." And when DeLorean expressed reluctance, the man said, "Well, these are some serious people. You know, if you back out now, you could have your daughter's head in a bag sent to you." So he said, "You can't back out now." And on a third meeting, the government provided cocaine to John DeLorean for him to sell to these shady characters that they'd already told him they couldn't back out of. And John DeLorean was caught on video selling the government's cocaine for this $15 million, and he was arrested. And this was an FBI informant who had convinced him and hatched this entire plan. And in that case, the entrapment defense was successful because the government had been pushing the entire time, and he had never been involved in the drug trade before. And so it was a successful entrapment. And I just wanted to give that because that's a very pristine example of what entrapment looks like. Somebody with no connection to drugs was convinced to sell cocaine. But here's a few more examples that might hit a little bit closer to home. In United States versus Al-Moyad, Al-Moyad was a Yemenis cleric, and he had previously been a spiritual advisor to Osama bin Laden back in the 80s, but he broke off with him in the 80s and had not talked to him since then. But an informant, the guy you see on the floor there, said that, "I just met this guy, and he told me," the informant, whose name was Al-Ansi, said, "I just met Al-Moyad, and he told me that he's been giving money to terrorist organizations. Do you want me to try to get him for you?" And so he had organized a meeting in Germany with Al-Moyad, and he spoke to him, and he said, "I want you to help. I want you to give some money." And Al-Moyad at first responded, I can give zakat. I can help feed the poor. I don't feel comfortable giving to. I don't feel comfortable giving to. In this case, it was Al-Qaeda and Hamas. And he said, I don't want to do that. And the man kept pushing him and said, you need to give some money. This is part of your duty. And eventually he gave, and he was arrested. Well, in this case, the entrapment defense was kind of halfway successful. He was convicted at trial, but then the appeal court said that he had a good entrapment defense, and so it was put back to the trial court, and he ended up pleading guilty, and it was time served, and he went back to Yemen. With the other case, this one is an example of a much more typical entrapment case that was not successful. This is Muhammad Osman Muhammad. He was 19 years old. He was, before the events that I'm about to tell you, he was just a normal teenager. He liked the LA Lakers, it said, and the court opinion. He liked listening to music and hanging out with his friends. But on the way home from the airport, he was racially profiled and harassed at the airport, and that made him really mad, and he started corresponding secretly with Samir Khan. And Samir Khan had an extremist magazine written in English, and Mr. Muhammad ended up contributing 3 articles to the magazine, which is not illegal. He ended up contributing 3 articles to the magazine, and he kind of broke off his communications after that point with Samir Khan. But his parents were worried, and so they forwarded one of Muhammad's emails to the FBI, asking them for help. They wanted the FBI to counsel their son. They could tell that he was getting involved in stuff that was not Islamic and not good, and they were worried that he was being attracted to extremism, and so they reached out to the FBI for help. Well, instead of helping Muhammad's parents, the FBI used the email address that he had used to communicate with Samir Khan, and he was in college by this time, and the FBI started emailing him and trying to. They asked him if he wanted to become operational, and left it a little bit vague. And eventually, to make a long story short, the FBI came up with a plan to detonate a bomb at a Christmas tree lighting ceremony in Oregon. The FBI came up with a plan, funded the plan, pushed this 19-year-old boy to go forward with the plan, and they pushed him, and finally he really did go. The FBI even went so far as to make a fake bomb and gave him a clicker and told him that if you press this button, the bomb will go off. And he did it. Of course, the bomb didn't go off, and he was immediately arrested after that. But this entire scheme was cooked up by the FBI rather than this person, and he was a misguided young person, but instead of giving him counsel, they arguably entrapped him. But that's not what the court found. The court found that because he did not push back too much against the FBI's plan, and because he had previously since he had previously written articles for Jihad Recollections, which was Samir Khan's article, that showed a predisposition to commit a terrorist attack, and therefore his entrapment defense was unsuccessful. And this is a 19-year-old kid, and now he's going to be in prison for the next 30 years and a lifetime of supervised release. So I wanted to just dispel some myths about entrapment. I used the unicorn to indicate that these are myths. So myth number 1, a law enforcement officer or informant has to tell the truth. That is not true. I mean, undercover work would be impossible if that was true. They can say that they're Muslim when they're really not Muslim. They can pretend to be your friend. They can have a completely made-up identity. And that's perfectly legal. That's not necessarily entrapment. The government's use of artifice, stratagem, pretense, or deceit does not establish even the first step of entrapment. Myth number 2, it's automatically entrapment if the police ask you to commit a crime. That's not true either. Like I said in the Muhammad case, the police were the people who asked him, the FBI informant was the person who asked Muhammad to start doing this plan to blow up a bomb at the Christmas tree lighting ceremony, and he just went along with the FBI's suggestion. That does not mean that it's entrapment if somebody is asking you to commit a crime. You still have to, if you have a predisposition, it's not entrapment. and the police can't help you break the law. That's also not true, as you heard in that story about Muhammad. The police helped him, they bankrolled him. They gave him, the FBI informant gave him all of the money he needed to build the fake bomb, and drove him there and trained him and everything. And the police can't let you commit offense and then arrest you for it. Also not true, although they're not going to let you they wouldn't let someone commit a violent offense, but they will let you conspire or attempt to do a crime, and they can still arrest you for it even if they're the ones pushing you to do it. Okay, so I just want to talk about how to protect yourself, and this will kind of become clear. You might be wondering why you would need to, because you would never do any of this, and so I'm just going to... Okay, so be careful what you say. So I want to talk, this is very important. It's a myth about the First Amendment. One of our attorneys said that I could quote her saying the First Amendment is on life support. The First Amendment says that you can't be arrested or charged with a crime for pure speech. But, and this is a big but, speech can be evidence of a predisposition to commit a crime. And so if somebody is entrapped, or a young person is reading some stuff that they shouldn't be reading, or getting involved with some people they shouldn't be involved in, the statements that they make, even if it's just speech, can be used to show predisposition. Going back to the Muhammad case that I showed you, he had just written articles for this English language Jihad Recollections magazine, and the court said that that was enough to show a predisposition to commit the crime. And so the second piece of advice that's connected to this is use common sense. It's okay to say political things even if they're controversial. Like, in the United States, you have the right to criticize the government's policy in Syria. You have the right to criticize Assad's murdering his people. You have the right to say that Israel is committing apartheid. Or you have the right to say these things. But you have to, this is connected with the next point, there's no bright lines, but use common sense. If somebody shouldn't say, well, I support, this kind of goes without saying, I support ISIS. It's not going to, and that's not what the first thing that an informant is going to say to you if you meet one. They start out, they groom people. One case that I'm working on, the defendants that we're representing knew the informant for 3 years before they were arrested, and they met with the informant for 3 hours a day, 4 days a week during that time. And so it might be things that you agree with, or that everybody should agree with, but they'll start with that and then say, some informants will say, well, Muslims should be able to defend themselves, and then they'll take that step and twist it, which is a true statement, but then they'll start to twist it to, they attacked Muslim countries first, therefore we can attack people here. And this is what informants will do, and it will be just a slippery slope, one little step at a time. And so if somebody starts to say these things, and you notice that it's starting to cross a certain line, like they're starting to advocate violence or starting to support terrorist groups, that's a sign that you should speak up. If somebody is saying something, say, well, I disagree with that, I strongly, and if it starts to get really bad, you should definitely talk to an attorney. And so I have there, at a certain point, call the police. If somebody starts saying, I'm planning to do something violent, at that point you should call the police if they're actively planning to do something violent, because that's not something that anybody would. But I'm trying to show that there is kind of a spectrum where it's okay to say political things, But if they start advocating for violence, that's really where you have to say, okay, I need to talk to a lawyer and I strongly disagree with what you're saying. So avoid bad company. This is kind of connected to the last point. Like if somebody is coming close to the line but not quite crossing it, like they're using violent rhetoric but not necessarily advocating for violence, you might want to avoid that person, not spend time with them because they could be an informant. And this is an important point. If the FBI contacts you, even if they just want to talk, you should definitely call a lawyer. As Abdullah was saying, the CLCMA is pro bono, and there's lawyers that you can talk to and call. But if the FBI wants to talk to you, they're an intelligence gathering organization, and so you should definitely speak with a lawyer. My boss, Charlie Swift, always likes to say that Bill Gates, well-known American, if the FBI told Bill Gates, we want to speak to you, the question wouldn't be whether he was going to talk to a lawyer. The question would be how many lawyers is he going to bring with him to that meeting? Because you have a Sixth Amendment right to effective assistance of counsel. And so one reason why to do this, even if you haven't done anything wrong, and I don't think anybody here ever would, but even if you haven't done anything wrong, you need to have a lawyer with you because the FBI is allowed to lie to you, but you're not allowed to lie to them. And if you have an attorney there, they're going to be a lot less likely to lie to your attorney. And so if somebody is acting like very suspicious and you start to suspect that they might be an attorney and it's not that the FBI is talking to you, you should talk to a lawyer and find out what is the best advice, or to someone you trust. So be careful what you do. This is the closest that it comes to a bright line. If someone shows you a weapon or a bomb and it looks like, this is common sense. I'm sure everybody here knows this, but you should call the police. And again, the First Amendment does not protect action. The First Amendment does not protect action at all. It just protects speech. And again, like I said at the beginning of this talk, speech can still be evidence that you had a predisposition to commit a crime, even if it's protected speech under the First Amendment. And so, that's I'm about ready to wrap it up. I just wanted to say again that CLCMA is supported by a generous grant from the MLFA, and I just wanted to say that we're very grateful to them for that. And that's it. Any questions? Yes. Yes.
So you were talking about the entrapment case has to be perfect in order to succeed.
Yes.
When it is perfect, it seems like the information that has been gained through entrapment is inadmissible if the word of law is thrown out. So why is it that even though entrapment itself is something negative, has a negative criminal connotation, yet it is not a crime for the law enforcement to engage in this?
Right. Yes. Yes.
It's the entrapment defense that's not usually successful.
Yes, it's the entrapment defense that's not. Yes, I want to be clear about that. Yeah, I didn't understand your question. But the entrapment defense is not usually successful. Entrapment, the police tactic, is often successful. Yes. Yes.
I wanted to bring one point in before Sam goes into details.
Yes.
MLFA has generally in the past 15, 16 years shied away from entrapment cases because it is extremely, extremely difficult to win entrapment cases.
Yes.
Because, innamal amal binniyah, right, is the intention. Well, if you take action, that's it, it's done. It doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter what you intended. As soon as you put that first step forward, it's virtually impossible to win. Right. From the defense side of it.
Right. So as to why it's illegal, why it's not illegal, it's against FBI policy technically, but they still do it, especially since they rely on informants who are not trained in this stuff, and oftentimes, as Abdullah was saying, are criminals who have been arrested and are trying to get leniency. And so it is discouraged in the FBI, but as far as why it's not illegal, I can't really answer that question, but I imagine that they don't want to disincentivize using undercover operations because they think that catches, wrongly in my view, think that catches people. Yes? Yeah. Yes.
So I'm not sure what the government gains out of that. I mean, the person will not have committed crime to begin with, most likely. And then I can bring people out, Muslims, and doing it one at a time.
What do you say? Oh, yes.
Did you understand this question?
I did. So you're asking, why would the government do this if they weren't going to commit a crime? So Abdullah's saying that he has an answer, but I have.
So I'm not sure if it's on that brochure. The budget for the FBI is something $3 billion. Sorry, $1 trillion or $1 billion? Sorry, $3 billion annually. They have to justify why that budget is there. So the gain is that we are catching criminals. Look, we need more money. That's what Trevor Aronson has mentioned in his presentations so far.
Right.
So the entrapment case is more of putting up a facade saying that, hey, look, we're catching criminals. But in reality, that's not the case.
Right. Just to build on that, I think it has to do with wanting to justify their existence. They need to show that they need to show that they're catching people, and so this is one way to do that. And I think it also probably has something to do with rampant Islamophobia, unfortunately.
I just want to latch on to what you said. So I think when they have these successful prosecutions,
Yes.
it leads to their promotions. It is a promotion.
Yes.
I know the district attorneys, I worked as an interpreter many years ago in the federal courts of New York City, in Manhattan, and Brooklyn.
Right.
And I know there's always pressure on the defendant to plea bargain.
Yes.
Because, you know, it's threatening, the prosecution is threatening, you're gonna be put away for 30 years. You will plea bargain, 5 years, you'll be done. And this makes him look good on his resume, that how many cases he has.
Absolutely.
Right. Right.
I have a question. Why was John DeLorean targeted by FBI? What did he do wrong?
In that case, I really, that was a really egregious case. That's kind of a textbook case of entrapment, and the answer is really nothing. He was the informant who entrapped John DeLorean was a former drug dealer himself, and he agreed to be an informant. To get leniency, and so he saw somebody who was really desperate for money and took advantage of that. And I think that that's unfortunately sometimes how it happens in these cases.
So another thing about informants is this. We funded a case, MLFA funded a case defending Hamid Hayat, a 19-year-old young man who is challenged mentally, and he went back to Pakistan to get married, but instead he spent a year there helping his dad build a madrasa and some other agricultural stuff. And when he was there, before he came back to the States, he bought, I don't know what you call it in Urdu, or in Bangla you call it tabiz, the one that you put prayers on it. What do you call that in Urdu? The amulet, right? So he bought that as a souvenir from Pakistan, and he came to the States. As soon as he came to the States, the FBI came knocking, arrested him, brought him and his dad to their office, and they were saying that you trained at a terrorist camp in Pakistan, right? They forced him. He is not that intelligent. He said, yes, whatever you tell me to do, I'll say yes, and he left. Now, there's an outrageous case behind it. At the end of the day, he's innocent, he's free, because the camp that they were talking about was closed down 6 years before he even went to Pakistan. So that's not even, but there was an informant behind this story. And the informant was paid over $250,000 by the FBI to make sure that they find the number 2 of Al-Qaeda in Lora, California. So the informant, when he got arrested initially, he told the FBI, hey, listen, I got a bigger fish that I can help you catch. Well, I saw this guy pray at Lora, California, and if you